near and dear to everyone in leadership. This week we had an interesting situation after Apple unveiled a number of products. Apple comes out with products every year, if not sometimes in between their annual conference, etc. And this year's unveiling bared out some interesting comments from people. Obviously, you'll have people who always love any new Apple product. Hey, I'm a person who's deep in the ecosystem. I've got a MacBook, MacBook Pros, iMacs, iPads, iPhones, etc. But on the other side of that, some people who were a little bit more critical. And I think before I talk about what they were critical about, I want to share a quick clip from Apple's founder Steve Jobs that I think will add some context.
I see. I mean, Apple was a company that was based on innovation. When I left Apple 10 years ago, we were 10 years ahead of anybody else. It took Microsoft 10 years to copy Windows. The problem is that Apple stood still. Even though it invested cumulatively billions in R&D, the output has not been there, and people have caught up with it, and its differentiation has eroded, in particular with respect to Microsoft. And so the way out for Apple, and I still think Apple has a future, there's some awfully good people there, and there's a tremendous brand loyalty to that company. I think the way out is not to slash and burn, it's to innovate. That's how Apple got to its glory, and I think that's how Apple could return to it.
So what's pretty clear from Steve Jobs is two things. One, he felt where Apple started was not where it was currently operating, and he felt the idea or the way to remedy that was innovation. And I think that speaks to some of the comments you heard coming out of the conference from Apple this week, is that a lot of people felt like there was not the level of innovation that they were used to, that they really wanted to see transformation, and what they saw at the unveiling of the products was incremental. And I think it points to a learning lesson for all of us as leaders. A lot of times people talk about the founder's dilemma, and if you Google it, what you'll find is a common dilemma that speaks to when a founder starts an organization, he or she gets to these crossroads, and it is a true dilemma. And it's based on the choices, the person can become rich or they can become king. And what is meant by that is they can become rich by giving up some of their equity, some of their ownership and control of the company, and then be a part of, going public, bringing in whether it's private equity stakeholders, venture capitalists, etc. And they become rich because now the value of the company has increased significantly. The other side of that is, or they can be king. And if they're king, that means they hold the equity, they hold total control, and essentially run the company as they see fit with all power. But one of the things in the founder's dilemma that's always pointed out is you cannot have both. You can't become rich and keep total control. But I think that's only one dilemma. I think there's a second founder's dilemma. And that second founder's dilemma is the jet propulsion behind innovation for the company. The founder, any of us as founders and leaders, have a view when we create something new and bring it to the market. It's usually born out of some burden. For years, I worked at a company called Legal Shield. It was founded by Harland, and I forget his name right now. You have to forgive me. He's passed away, but just a wonderful founder, and literally started the company because he had a horrible automobile accident, found that going through the legal process was draining all of his funds to the point of almost near bankruptcy, and said, how do I create a product, a service, a system that will let the average person be able to afford legal services? And he was bent on making sure that company came to fruition. Fast forward, he grew an incredible company. And then at one point said, well, he's getting older in years. He's, him and his wife probably wants to travel more, wants to do different things. And he sells the company, and he stays on for a while to help obviously lead the company, and then turns it over to the next CEO. Now, when the story is told about Legal Shield and whatnot, and they talk about Harlan, they talk about that transformative energy. They talk about bringing something to market that never existed. They talk about the innovation of going around to state and getting law firms to be a part of this new ecosystem of legal services. Since that time, has there been transformation? Of course there has been. But the CEOs that followed Harlan don't necessarily have that same burden. And it's hard to place that burden in people's. But I think that is a part of what we can learn from what Steve Jobs has said and what he has done. If you think about it, most of us grew up in the era of, we moved from wax to cassette tapes to CDs, and then Steve Jobs introduced the iPod and told us on this device, you'll be able to take your catalog, your book of CDs, and put everything on this one device. And most of us didn't believe it. And not only did he give us a device, but you need to understand that he and Apple were not the first ones to bring it to market. They were the first ones to create it in such a way that it was hyper intuitive and that it made sense to the average consumer. He went from there to then saying, okay, great, you've got that and you've gotten used to that. Let's give you other products, right? So they give us computers and MacBooks, etc. And then we get the iPhone, and the iPhone changes the game. And so we've seen from Steve Jobs that level of constant innovation, almost never being good enough, and getting ahead of customer needs, not waiting for what consumers want, but trying to give consumers something they will want. How do we, as founders, embed that level of innovation into the DNA of the company? That, to me, is the second dilemma to address, family. And if you've got thoughts, drop them in the comments, because I do not have the answer. I have identified the opportunity, and I believe it's a significant opportunity. But collectively, as leaders, as founders, we need to find it. Hey, until next time, be informed, be empowered, be accountable.